There are prayers for healing, prayers for safety, prayers for mercy, hope, rain, rebirth. But every prayer has the same foundation: belief. You must mean it. You must want it. You must trust it. But there is one that does not work that way. It's old, older than the languages it's been translated into. It appears only in fragments, passed down in riddles and footnotes, always hidden at the edges of sacred texts. And when spoken aloud, it does something strange. It protects you, only if you don't believe in it. Those who recite it with true faith are either cursed, marked, or simply vanish. Those who speak it casually, even mockingly, are spared. And those who understand its real meaning, those who try to outsmart it, learn quickly that it doesn't care what you understand, only what you believe. They call it the reversed prayer, the doubtward invocation, or the unsacred asking. But none of those are the original name, because no one knows the original name, and those who've claimed to know it have all gone silent, or worse, started saying it backward. The earliest mention comes from a burned heretical scroll recovered from the ruins of a monastery in southern France. The ink had melted through the parchment, but between the ruined lines, one sentence remained intact. Let not your faith be louder than your voice, lest you be heard. Over time, whispers about the prayer circulated through outlawed religious sects, rogue monasteries, and occult grimoires. It was never written out in full, only referenced in riddles or corrupted phrases, and always with the same warning. Say it only if you don't believe it will work, because the moment your heart begins to trust it, something else answers instead. That's where it begins. A ritual designed to test your doubt, to reward the hollow voice, the half-hearted chant, the accidental utterance. Not because it's broken, because it was built that way. In the chapters ahead, we'll trace the origins of this backwards blessing through forbidden texts, failed rituals, and the strange fate of those who dared to mean it. Because there are things in this world that don't want your faith. They want your hesitation. And when you give it to them, they listen. It doesn't appear in holy books, not fully. There are no direct transcriptions, no full passages, just fragmented lines scattered across centuries, buried in burned manuscripts, scrawled in the margins of banned grimoires, and whispered in coded chants by those who knew better than to speak it plainly. The first known reference comes from a 9th century Syriac scroll, now lost but partially transcribed by a monastic scribe named Maron al-Sinjar. Among the writings, mostly copied liturgies and fevered end-times theology, there's a single note in a different hand. Do not trust the one that listens through belief. Its answer is swift and never wrong. It was dismissed as apocryphal madness until similar phrasing reappeared 300 years later on a weathered page in the Codex Sanguinis, a book written in blood and stitched into the hides of condemned monks. That version included a prayer, but only partial. I ask with no name, I ask with no hope. Let the silence hear me, but not know me. What followed was missing. The rest had been violently carved out of the page. In 1317, an unnamed Franciscan scribe was burned for heresy after attempting to include an unapproved prayer in the margins of a sanctioned psalter. He claimed the prayer was the last protection for the unbeliever, and that it came to him during a dream after 40 days of fasting and silence. According to trial transcripts, he had written it on parchment, then whispered it to himself before sleeping to test it. He never woke up, but his roommate claimed the air in the room smelled like crushed lilies and rot. The parchment was found in his hands, blank. It doesn't stop there. Across medieval Europe, a heretical sect known only as the Hollow Men were hunted for spreading a spoken ritual they said was meant for those who would never kneel. They described a prayer that could protect you from death, disease, or possession, but only if you said it without reverence. They recited it with smirks, with sarcasm, even under their breath while pretending to sleep. But when inquisitors tortured one of their captured leaders and forced him to recite the prayer with sincere faith, his body erupted into seizures. His final words, according to witnesses, were, "You made me believe. Now it knows me." Some scholars dismissed this pattern as reverse psychology cloaked in spiritual rebellion, a way for fringe groups to justify their detachment from doctrine. But as more cases appeared, the explanation grew less satisfying. In the early 1800s, an occult linguist named Ezra Holcomb published a banned pamphlet called The False Tongue, in which he described a collection of phrases that only act when spoken without faith. He believed they were remnants of an ancient, anti-divine intelligence, something older than worship, that feeds not on praise, but on hesitation, mistrust, and sacred mockery. According to Holcomb, these phrases aren't broken prayers. They're instructions to something else entirely, something that only wants to hear from you if you don't believe it's listening. A pattern began to emerge. Those who recited the prayer as a joke, a curiosity, a test, often walked away untouched. Nothing happened, or so it seemed. But those who returned to it, those who began to feel something during the recitation, those who started to hope it might work, they were the ones who felt the pressure, the air thinning, the taste of iron, the sound of something listening too closely, because faith is a light, and this prayer attracts what hides from it. They never think it will work the first time. That's the strange thing about this prayer. Most who try it don't actually believe in it. Not at first. They say it the way people tell ghost stories in candlelight, nervous, curious, maybe laughing. And for a while, nothing happens. No thunder, no visions, no miracles. So they say it again and again, until the rhythm starts to feel familiar, and belief begins to seep in, even if they don't mean for it to. That's when the prayer notices. A college student in Romania once discovered a reference to the reversed prayer in a translated occult blog. A partial transcription said to be pulled from a 15th century grimoire. He recited it out loud, mostly for fun. He and his roommate laughed afterward. But the next morning, he woke to find the back of his mirror covered in ash, shaped like a handprint. His roommate had no memory of the night. The student tried the prayer again the following evening, this time seriously. He admitted, in a later forum post, that he wanted it to work. It did. Over the next 3 weeks, he claimed the lights in his room flickered only when he spoke. His dreams began syncing with things his classmates said the next day. Then the mirror cracked. Not shattered, just split in a thin, perfect line from top to bottom. That night, he posted a final message online. "I think I believe too much now. It's listening back." He hasn't posted since. Another story, this one from a nurse in Dublin, describes a patient who was admitted after having a psychological break. He refused to sleep, saying something would answer if he rested. He'd been repeating a phrase under his breath that none of the staff could recognize. After several days of exhaustion, he finally passed out in his room. He was found the next morning with his hands pressed to his ears, whispering one final sentence over and over. "I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it." He never spoke again. Others who have encountered the prayer try to be clever. They think they can outsmart it, say it backward, repeat it in code, or write it without vocalizing. But it seems the only rule that matters is belief. The moment you give the words meaning, they stop being yours. They become something else's. One woman shared her experience in a private audio log, leaked years later. "I said it because I was scared. I didn't want it to be real, but I also hoped it would work. That's what did it. The hope. That's what it heard." She claimed the moment she spoke it with sincerity, something in the room changed. Not the lighting, not the temperature, the pressure. Like the air itself bent inward. She vomited immediately, not bile, not food, a page, a torn scrap of text she didn't recognize, soaked in ink. Her voice was hoarse for 3 days. She never said the prayer again. But she swears she hears it sometimes. Whispered behind walls, carved lightly into condensation, floating beneath radio static. The pattern holds. Those who speak it casually walk away untouched. Those who speak it earnestly disappear into silence, madness, or worse. Become instruments for something else to speak through. And then there are the believers who never said it at all. One pastor, deeply devout, reported that during a fit of illness, he couldn't move his mouth but kept hearing a phrase whispered in his thoughts. The same line, repeated over and over in a voice that wasn't his. Say it without needing it. Say it without faith. He never did. But within the year, his congregation split. His sermons became darker, more erratic. He was later found writing on the walls of his own home, pages of the reversed prayer in different languages. When asked why, he simply said, "If I don't believe, it won't hear me." But it already did. These aren't cautionary tales about playing with things you don't understand. They're warnings about what happens when you do understand, when something old, something listening, begins to recognize sincerity as an invitation. Because this prayer doesn't want your voice, it wants your conviction. And once it has that, it doesn't need anything else. Most prayers go unanswered. That's what we tell ourselves. We pray, we wait, we hope. But nothing happens. Silence is expected. It's comforting in its own way, a reminder that maybe the world is just quiet and random, and that no one is listening too closely. But this one isn't silent for long. For those who've crossed the invisible line between doubt and belief, the prayer doesn't just stop working. It begins to answer. Not in words, not in voices, in presence, in echoes, in subtle, spiraling changes that feel too specific to be chance. One man claimed that after years of dismissing the prayer as a hoax, he said it one last time, not with faith, but with desperation. His wife had vanished 2 nights before. No trace, no evidence of forced entry, just her phone, her keys, and a single line written in dust on the bathroom mirror. "You still believe, don't you?" He said the prayer aloud before bed, not even fully conscious of what he was doing. That night, he dreamed of her, standing in a forest made of doorways. She said nothing, but as he stepped closer, her mouth opened, and the prayer poured out of her in a voice that wasn't hers. He woke, gasping. The next day, their bedroom ceiling had a perfect circle of soot above his bed, burned from the inside. No fire, no damage, just the mark. Others report more immediate responses. A woman in Argentina began to hear the prayer whispered from objects. First the air vents, then her television, then from within her own reflection, not spoken aloud, but mouthed silently by her mirror self. And always the same line came after. "Now you know what it means." There are claims that the prayer rewrites itself after you believe in it. The words change. The phrasing reverses. What once was a plea becomes a warning. Some have reported hearing the prayer backward in dreams. Not as gibberish, but as questions. Targeted specific questions about things only they remember. One man, a linguist, recorded his sleep for 7 nights after reciting the prayer sincerely. On the 7th night, at 3:03 a.m., his audio picked up a faint whisper, not present in previous recordings. A phrase in a language not recognized by any software. But when reversed and filtered, it translated roughly to, "You offered yourself. It was accepted." He hasn't spoken publicly since. Sometimes the prayer answers not with speech, but with mirroring. One woman said the lights in her apartment flickered in sync with her breathing for an entire week. Another saw her phone unlock itself and begin typing the words of the prayer one line at a time, slowly, deliberately, even when it was turned off. And for a few, the prayer doesn't wait anymore. It begins to speak first. A man who worked in a museum of banned religious texts reported hearing the prayer whispered behind glass cases that had no speakers. The voice always came when he was alone, always just behind him, and always said the same thing. "Speak me before you think me." He later wrote that it felt as if the prayer was using him, not to be spoken, but to reach others. His colleagues began reporting nightmares, illness, lost time. One described opening a blank document and finding the prayer already typed out, in her own formatting style. No one ever sent it. The worst cases end in silence, not because nothing happened, but because those affected stopped talking. Not catatonia, not fear, a kind of agreement, a surrender to something they could no longer deny and no longer doubt. Because once the prayer begins to answer back, it stops being a ritual. It becomes a relationship. And like all relationships built on the wrong kind of attention, it doesn't let go easily. Most rituals reward faith. This one punishes it. You don't need candles, you don't need a circle or a name or even the full phrasing. All you need is the act of speaking and the absence of belief. Because the moment you want it to work, the moment you begin to trust it, something else takes over. This prayer doesn't care about your hope. It listens for your doubt. It feeds on the part of you that doesn't expect to be heard, and answers only when you whisper without meaning it. And maybe that's the most disturbing thing. Not that it works, but that it knows you. It waits for the exact moment your voice begins to tremble, not from fear, but from sincerity. That's when the words change. That's when the air tightens. That's when the prayer begins to respond, not to what you said, but to what you meant. So ask yourself this. If you were desperate, if you needed protection, could you say it without meaning it? Could you lie to something that already knows what you're really asking for? Tell me in the comments. Have you ever said something sacred, not out of faith, but out of fear? And did it work? And if this story lingered with you, like a voice you didn't mean to speak, then like this video, subscribe for more, and return with me to the forbidden. Because some things don't need belief to be real. They just need to be heard.